Hello again everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Feed the Beast. Now, some of you might be wondering why I've got a hat on my head. Well, quite simply, the hats mod's installed. You press H on your keyboard and it lets you get a selection of hats from any mobs you kill that are wearing a hat. Right now, so the top is my favourite. Between this episode and last, like I said, I have done some mining and I've also done a little bit of redecorating. Just laid some things out, organised my chest a little bit. I've also made some peridot sword and a ruby pickaxe. This is from Project Red. It basically adds slightly lower gems like ruby, sapphire and peridot, which is essentially what emerald was before emerald was added to the game. I've not quite diamond class, they can't mine obsidian and they don't quite do the same damage, but they're still quite good weapons, high durability and a bit more common than diamond. So, where we left off from the last episode, let me just start by saying I was going to reveal what was behind this wall last time I did that, and there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing at all when I was giving this out, but I kept hearing noises, so I dug up slightly, and yes, I did find a spawner, which I'm not too keen on taking on from this angle. Luckily, however, I did find another route in. So now I just need to go light up this spawner. Okay, here he is. No, don't blow up my spawner. Guess my hole comes in useful for something. So I'll just let you know that I did find a spawner down here, and I'm sure it'll come in use later. I wonder if we've got anything interesting. Ooh, safari net. That is from Mine Factory Reloaded, a Thumb-Nomicon. I was just about to make one of them shortly, but that saves us a job. But yeah, safari net. I'll get into them later on, but it's something handy to have. But I'll leave some of this in here for later. But for those of you who know what the mods are, you can have a look at them and see. Let's get louder. So obviously, from Mine Factory Reloaded, it's basically a Pokeball, but a safari net. And a Thumb-Nomicon, which we'll get into Thumbcraft later on. Some of you may have noticed this wall I've got here, and how it's a little unusual. Well, this is actually monster jerky, and basically it's from the drying rack that's added by Tinker's Construct. You put a bit of rotten flesh up there, let it sit for about 5 minutes, real time, and it will turn into some monster flesh, which I believe is basically like eating zombie flesh, but without the negative effect. So it's a handy thing to do with rotten flesh now. It just takes a little bit of time to dry, since it's a drying rack. But you'll end up with some monster jerky, and if you've got nothing else to eat, it's pretty handy, especially if you're living underground and constantly getting attacked. I've also found a few other things downstairs. I'll take you to that and show you. I did find a bit of a ravine down here, but I ended up taking a different route to it. I ended up just sticking into that cave and just kept going with it, but I've actually forgotten the route I took to where I went, because I just kept going in basically one direction and picking up everything as I went. Oh, and I missed some fire shards. I don't know, I found another exit. But I'll meet you to where we're going, certainly. Ah, here we are actually. It's just down here. Oh, it's the apple hat. And down we go. While I was down here, I found another spawner. But I've already got one upstairs, so I don't actually need this one anymore. Perhaps I'm doing something wrong. I expected to get something for soul shards, but I may have just wasted one. I'll look into that and let you know later, but you do need spawners for the new soul shards too. Basically you have to craft a sword and then craft the cage and then kill one mob now instead of the killing 1,000. But But there was something else I found down here. Diamonds. Something you always capture the first time you find. There we go, there's the achievement. Let this back up again. 6 diamonds, so I'll meet you back upstairs. Right guys, I think it's about time we get to automation, or at least a less manual way of processing our ores here. So there's various routes that we could take. Most commonly it would be industrial craft, which actually requires quite a lot of iron. Thermal expansion, which requires a bit of copper for the power production to get going, and is a bit more awkward with power compared to industrial craft. There's several others. There's the Thaumcraft route. There is also the Tinker's Construct, which is a very good way to start because I'll be using that later on as well, but does require quite a bit of clay to get going. So if you're unlucky with a clay start, as I was slightly, so I went up to the villages up a bit here in the map there, in the water there, and went up underwater for some clay, but I think I'm going to stick with thermal expansion, and I'll get back to you once I've processed up some more to get going. Alright guys, before jumping into this automation, I was just going to say I have died a few times while I was down in the caves, and I will go straight back to spawn, which is rather annoying. So I'd like to take this chance to make myself a bed, which I should have done a while ago, but here we go. So cotton, to get some wool, and there we go. I just thought I'd show you cotton in action to see how it does work, and here should be a fine enough spot for it. Okay, first off, for some thermal expansion, I'd like to start by making the crescent hammer. You readily would need the tools to use it on, but some to get the way. Now, something I didn't cover about not enough items is this question mark. If you click this question mark, it will show you the outlay of the tool you need to make. Or, alternatively, you can press shift and the question mark, and if you have the items in your inventory, it will put it there automatically, and it will put enough for the maximum number that you can make. Now we're only needing one, so that's what I'll do. Now the first item that we'd need, or like to have, is the pulverizer. And to make this you need the machine casing at the centre. Now we're going to need 3 of these because I'm making 3 machines. So shift click again, and there we go. Now I am actually running a bit low on glass, so I've just got this cooking up here. Should maybe have enough. So back to the pulverizer. I need a redstone reception coil. This is used for all machines receiving power. There's a transmission coil. The reception coil requires gold. The transmission coil is used for any machine transmitting energy, like a dynamo, which we'll get to shortly, which would use a silver, I believe, actually. Yes, and if you get to storage and receives and transmits, you will need a ferrous, I believe, although it could have changed in recent times, but we'll get to all that later on. So let's start by getting 2 of these. And what am I lacking here? Pulverizer. Redstone. Been needing a bit of that. Okay, pulverizer, redstone. There we go. Get 2 of these. And what else do we need? Piston. 1 of them. And there's the pulverizer. Is it? No, flint. Let's try this one more time. There we go. Pulverizer. I'm going to put this here. Now, the pulverizer requires power. In old times it used to be buildcraft power that run thermal expansion machines, but now it requires red flux energy. I think it's red flux. And yes, it is a red flux capacitor for storage. And to generate this we need thermal expansion zone machines, which I believe at the moment is dynamos, which we've got steam, magnetic and compression. But I'd like to make the next machine in order first, which is the redstone furnace. Which we've got the machine casing, we've got the reception coil, but I need some bricks. So let me go make some of that up just now. While I've got that smelting up, why don't we work on generating the power required? So I think I'm going to go with the steam dynamo, which will require a bit of copper, although magnetic is an option with Invar, but it requires to make Invar ingots, which is mixing a few metals together, and the compression, which requires a tin. But different fueling methods, and I don't really fancy getting some lava at this point, so I'm going to stick with the steam, which will just run off of coal. So we need some copper, redstone, and a redstone transmission coil. I think I'd like to get 2 of these at the moment, and some copper gears. Now there's two options. We can go for Thermal Expansion's own copper gears, which is copper surrounding iron, or we can go for Forester's options here, which is copper around a stone gear, around a wooden gear, which is sticks. This is a slightly longer step to make, but I believe it to be a bit cheaper. So I'm going to go with that option. So let's make a few of them just now. I'm making 2 of them. I'll need. There we go. And finally the copper. Now I've got 2 steam dynamos. Now I should have the bricks here to make redstone furnace. Now obviously we could connect the dynamos straight onto the blocks, but I'd rather balance them out between them. So we're going to need something to transmit the energy, which is what I've laid out here for. And I believe the best option for this would be the leadstone energy conduit, which if you hold shift over the items will show you how much they can transfer, which is 80 RF per tick, which is sufficient for what we need at the moment. Higher levels are hardened, which would require some invert ingots again, which is higher up the chain, and they go up the energy cells, which are liquid fluid transposer, as well as redstone, liquid redstone, and a very complicated process all around. So I'm going to stick simple just now. Some lead, some glass, and some redstone, and I think we'll only need about 4 just now actually. That should do us. So let's place some of this down and see what we need now. We'll get the leadstone energy cells. 1 short. Let's make another batch. Or actually could make a leadstone energy cell with some lead, glass, and a block of redstone, which could fill a gap and be handy for storing energy as well. Which needs a conductance coil, which is electrum. This is a bit of a complicated process at the moment, so let's just make another batch of this for now, and I'll get into storage later on once we have these machines up and running. I made a crescent hammer because if you don't have these down first and you place the machine, actually I'll demonstrate it just now, this will take a while to break. If you shift right click it'll take it up. A nice little feature. If you don't have that down first it'll face upwards and you can't correct it later unless you have a crescent hammer or other compatible wrench. And then shift right click removes, but just right click would rotate it. And see if I can demonstrate this time. There we go. Now these machines require coal and water, so to get some water I'll need to make an infinite water source and something to collect it here. So I happen to have 2 buckets to give me my infinite water source here, but I will need something to get it in. So another machine from Thermal Expansion is the aqueous accumulator. Here it is, which requires a pneumatic servo. Redstone, bit of glass, bit of iron, should be able to manage that. And here it was again. There we go. Aqueous accumulator. So you just basically replace the source block with this, and it can gather water from the atmosphere, I believe, and it varies on the biome you're in for the amount you get, but it just basically fills up every time a water block would. Now we do need a way to transfer this over to these machines, so I believe there's liquid ducts as well, or fluid ducts I think they're called. There's the opaque version which is just lead and copper, or the regular fluid ducts which requires hardened glass, which is obsidian and lead, which looks nicer but is a bit more of a further step we don't need to do just now. So just some copper and lead. That'll give us our fluid ducts. And if we just tweak that up to there, and there, we should see these are starting to get some water. So why don't I just throw in some coal in there just now. It'll do there, get some more. And put it in here. There we go. Now I should get some energy flowing. There we go, start seeing. So let's give it something to do. Gold would be a good example, I believe. Now you can actually set configurations here. The energy will show you the power usage, maximum power and energy stored. And the redstone configuration is you can ignore any redstone, disable when low, so if you apply a redstone signal it would disable it. And enable when high, which means if it doesn't receive a redstone signal it will be disabled by default, so a redstone will activate it. Something else to notice as well is that Wayla will actually show you the current energy stored inside a block, so our furnace is now full and our pulverizer is slowly filling up. Now as it starts to fill up, and I do believe there's a problem here, oh yes, our second dynamo is not receiving water because a non-filled fluid duct, an empty one, cannot connect to a full fluid duct. So just right click the pipe and we'll start receiving some water. Alright guys, I was actually gone for a bit of time between that last clip and this, and as I was going to explain is that once these are actually filled it will actually reduce the amount of output from these engines. So you can see now it's outputting 4 RF per tick. It won't completely shut down, but it will reduce the amount of power it's consuming for time. So the coal will last longer, but it will not completely stop using the coal. So you will have an internal buffer in each of the dynamos. You'll have the internal buffer on each of the machines. Plus I think the pipes hold a little bit of energy per one. I think it's 80 for these per pipe. But it will never actually stop producing the power. So it will slowly consume your coal over time, but it will become more energy efficient, and as the power becomes required it will use it, as well as having a small internal buffer of steam which it will use as well once its coal has been used up. So if I go ahead and chuck some of this gold in here to start processing, you'll see, actually before I do that I'm going to show you the configurations tab. You'll notice there's different colours on the blocks, and in this case you can disable them. You can see the colours in here changing. Blue for input, red for output, yellow for secondary output, and orange for combined output. So my plan here is I will eventually take in from the top, disable left, disable bottom, disable back, and put all out to the right into the furnace, which will accept from the left and have nowhere else to output. I believe I'll put the output on top eventually, which is just going to be a chest actually. But if I put the gold in here, you'll see that I chose thermal expansion over the rest of the ore processing facilities. If I press use some gold, actually I'm going to disable this for the demonstration purposes. You can smelt it, macerate it, giving us 2 crushed ore, which can be further processed in industrial craft later down the line to give you more gain overall. A pulverizer, which will give you 2 pulverized gold, and I believe, if I'm maybe mistaken with this actual material, but some ores actually have a secondary chance of giving you an item. So if I was to look at lead perhaps? Yes, lead would pulverize lead into 2 and give you a slight chance of silver. And the ferrous ore has a small chance of giving you shiny metal, which is rather hard to come by means of only ferrous ore has a 10% chance, or the shiny ingot itself, which I believe only comes from a blend. So that is the reason why I have chose thermal expansion over industrial craft as a start. And you can see here how it's staying there as an output. If I got a single piece of gold, I didn't even need that, it processes it through and now it started smelting it already. But that's why I've chosen thermal expansion over industrial craft or any other means of starting, as it has that capability. So I'm going to go ahead and process up the ore I have, and I'll meet up with you then. I did say I had a plan of inputs and outputs. Now the blue section here cannot actually accept from my chest as far as I believe, for taking items in, however it will receive it if it was pumped in. So let me take this chest back here for a second. However, the output side will force output, so to get around this problem I'm going to create a hopper. So anything we put into this hopper will go into this blue side. So here's the gold ore. Well, let's get a few more to process. Gold. That's I want to process the uranium here. Trust me to pick the 2 ores I don't want to process like that. Lead ore and tin ore. Get some iron in as well. And now that automatically gets put into the hopper, and we'll follow into the pulverizer as soon as it's ready to take it. But for the output, I'll take a chest, and I'm going to go make another chest put up there to take into the hopper. I can do that right now actually. Take these 2, and there's a chest. So we've got an input, an output, and just for completionist's sake, I am going to make a lever so that I can turn off the hopper if I do not want it to run. Or at least I believe that's how vanilla works. I was also to let you know that I did find out why I didn't get a soul shard item from the spawner down there, and it's because we don't have soul shards to installed. That was an assumption on my part. Also, I did say I was going to get to some energy storage, as this dynamo is actually run out of steam and coal, and this one's on its last legs for the steam, as it's got no energy. So once it drops below the half mark, it tends to not produce as much. So we're not far away from that, and so it's more to process. So let me get the things together to make something for energy storage, and I'll craft that with you. Okay, so to make some storage for this, I'm going to make the leadstone energy cell. To make this is just some copper, the frame, and the conductance coil. So to start with, the frame is just a block of redstone, some lead, and some glass. So there's our block. There's the frame. But to make the conductance coil we actually need some electrum. So electrum is slightly hard to get because you'll need to make it from a blend, which is gold dust and silver dust. So I'm going to disable output on this and make some gold dust and some silver dust. There we go. And one thing I never did mention about this, if none of you have ever had an experience with mods, pulverizers, macers, anything like that, my favourite feature about it is actually you can put cobblestone in here and it will turn it into sand. And one of my most hated things about vanilla is the fact that sand, and by extension glass, is at such a shortage. So I'm going to add in a second to make this blend up. I'm going to turn that back up so I can get some glass going because I'm running a little low. So let's get that electrum smelting, and I'll turn this back on. It'll just go into a queuing system, so it won't fill this inventory up until this one has emptied. And now that has emptied, we'll get sand in here second. As soon as I run through, there it is. But we'll take our electrum, make our conductance coil, and our energy cell. And I'm going to put this in line. Now this also has input sides and output sides. Now you can see most faces that we can see are blue, with the default being down as output. Now I think yellow is disabled and red is an output, so we're going to input from the right hand side and output to the left, and I'm just going to disable these as these are useless at the moment. And you can see just now we're actually gaining some energy. Now this is currently outputting 15 and it's gaining because we now have somewhere to put it, and this is outputting 40. Now these combined will be using, and a byproduct of cobblestone is flint, which I believe we process, gravel I should say, a byprocess of cobble is gravel and flint. However, flint will actually clog up the system of the furnace. Now as I was saying, this is producing 40 per dynamo, and this can accept 40, however this one can only accept 20, so it will receive 60. So we have an excess of 20 RF per tick going into our leadstone energy cell, because this is 60, 20, making our total of 80, which happens to be the extent of this leadstone energy cell conduit rather. So very shortly we'll have to extend these up into the higher regions, because at the moment even our limestone energy cell can only input or output 80, which is controllable. However, the higher versions, which would be the hardened cell, can take 400, the redstone energy cell being 2000, and resonant being 10,000. So to make a hardened cell we need some invar, which has a bit of a process in making it. If I can get into this, which is like in a blend, 2 iron and a ferrous. So I'll need to process that ferrous ore that we got earlier, but I've only got one of them. But for the moment, this redstone energy conduit and cell is sufficient to power the machines we have, and perhaps maybe one other if it was a 20, so we could very well get a second redstone furnace down here to speed up the process, but at this point in time I don't think that's required. So I'm going to turn this back on and let it run, as well as fill a little bit of coal. It looks like I've reached that time where I have to wrap up the episode. Now you may notice in the background there my base is a little bit of a mess, and that's because I actually updated the server, and in doing so I created some invisible blocks, like here and in the back there. I'll just get the crescent hammer and show you where I put it. There's some invisible blocks here, and that's because I updated the server and these weren't updated properly, so it caused a little bit of trouble for me. And I don't know how to get rid of them, I might have to live with them. But you may have noticed a sneak peek in one of the chests there that I've actually been out adventuring a little bit. One Furious Scott came to join us in the server, and I took a little second out to go explore with him. So the next episode will be partly a bit of an exploration with him, and then I'll go out later on and collect the treasures that I found, as I found a few villages and temple and a few little things like that. So I'll go over that next episode though. But for this episode anyway, thanks for watching everyone. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll join you next time. Goodbye.